And so, not to take up too much of your time, we can dive right into the first question. So could you tell us about why you were asked to be here at Elon today? I know we touched a little bit on that, but just tell me a little bit more.
Well, I think if you look at the curriculum for the college, is it looks at geopolitical issues, it looks at international issues, specifically tied to the Carolina Walker lecture series. The fact that I spent my entire career as an intelligence officer, and the last thing I did was, as the Defense Intelligence Agency Director, I'm the guy that's speaking to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, other senior leaders in Congress about what's happening from a geopolitical standpoint with our adversaries and threats globally. So I'd like to think I was a good fit, and it's been a pleasure being here.
That's awesome. It's great to have you. What messages did you share with your audience today?
A couple. It's Veterans Day, so one of the things that I wanted to do is make sure we recognize the veterans. And not only did I ask the veterans to stand, we serve as families. And so after the veterans sat, I said, if you are a sibling or a spouse of a veteran, please stand. So the message really about service. We talked a little bit about, the fact that it was the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month, that the armistice was signed for World War I, ending the war to end all wars, of course. We only got into World War II less than 2 decades later. So it was really about the context of service, the sacrifice those that have made before, and kind of moving our way into the discussions of the complexities of what's really happening in the global world right now, and how the global world order that we've all enjoyed for the last 80 years is being challenged greatly by a number of adversaries and competitors in ways that we've never seen, at least in the last 80 years.
Right. Well, thank you so much for touching on those topics and telling us about them.
And we talked a little bit about leadership at the end, which I always want to make sure that I never walk away from a group of students or anyone where I can say, here's some things to think about, because who you are as a leader is a lifelong journey.
Right, and the next generation as well.
Always.
Oh, yeah.
You're a work in progress.
That's awesome. Could you take us through your career and how you decided to join the military in the first place, and sort of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I am a Air Force brat, and what that means is my dad was in the Air Force. And then my brother was in the Air Force, and my dad was also, before I was born, was in the Army at the end of the Korean War. And so service is in the family. I have an uncle that hit the beach at Normandy on my mother's side. And so I knew the inevitability that the military was in my future. I just wasn't sure the path it was going to take me there. And interestingly enough, my sophomore year at App State, I'm walking across campus, and in the distance, there's a guy in battle dress uniform, the fatigues we wore in the 80s. And as we're walking toward each other, we're getting closer, I realize that it's a good friend from high school, a guy named Benny Duncan. And I went, I had no idea you were here. So we go to the cafeteria, we sit down, we have a conversation, and Benny goes, you ought to go talk to Captain Flora in the ROTC department. Well, I went to talk to Captain Flora in the ROTC department. He gave me a bunch of tests. Next thing you know, I'm in ROTC. And that's really how it all started. I was fortunate, I finished pretty high in my class, and the thing that I wanted to be was an intel officer. And so when I was commissioned in May of 1984, I was commissioned as an Army military intelligence officer, and I spent my entire career in the intel field. Starting off as a second lieutenant in the 82nd Airborne, spent about a third of my career in Special Operations Command, and then the last job I had, I ran the Defense Intelligence Agency in D.C., working for the Chairman and the Secretary of Defense.
Oh, wow. It's a long journey. I mean, you've been
36 and a half years in the making.
Oh, wow. And it started even before that with your family and your background.
It's kind of funny. We joked about the retirement in 2020 was turning 60, and the 20th move in 36 and a half years would be the drive to get back home to North Carolina.
Wow, how many places have you been to that, and what was your favorite that you've enjoyed the most?
Lots of places. We did Bragg a couple of times. We had a couple assignments in the Pentagon, in DC, up in Pennsylvania, a number of places up and down on the East Coast. The only overseas assignment was Izmir, Turkey, which was a NATO assignment for a couple of years from 97 to 99. And then spread into that are several deployments in South America during really the heavy counter-narcotics years of the early 90s. And then after the global war on terrorism kicked off after 9/11, I probably got a little over 4.5 years between my deployed time in Iraq and Afghanistan. As far as my favorite, was probably my hardest job was I was the senior intelligence officer for Central Command down in Tampa, Florida, working for General Mattis. It was just incredibly rewarding, learned a lot, surrounded by just tremendous leaders and a great staff and a lot of great teammates. And I just learned a lot and grew a lot as a leader and as an intel professional during that job.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, you've been everywhere. You've learned a lot.
I've been fortunate that I have grown up and learned and been in the situation to work for a lot of people that are going to show up in the history books down the road.
It's good to know. So you worked as an Army intelligence officer. How did you get into working in intelligence, and what was that work like?
So when you go through the RTC program, they have branches, whether it's infantry branch, field artillery, different things like that, and or aviation, and military intelligence is one of the branches. And so it's very competitive, and so if you finish near the top of your class, hopefully you get your first choice. Military intelligence was my first choice, and I had a pretty good GPA, and I did well in ROTC. So I got what I wanted to do and got to spend an entire lifetime working in the intel field.
That's awesome. What do you see as your biggest challenges facing, or the biggest challenges facing veterans today?
I think there's an incredible sense of camaraderie. It's a very disciplined lifestyle. It is very team-centric, and I think you lose a lot of that, and sometimes your identity becomes who you are as a soldier, and you lose a little bit of the identity of who you are as an individual. And as veterans transition out, some will struggle with that transition of what it means to be, I was this soldier for so many years, now I'm just me. You still have all that lineage, all that background, should be very proud of all the things you did. But even at the general officer level, I had one of my senior leaders tell me, he goes, probably about the 90-day mark, you're going to be in a little bit of a funk because I used to be the guy that did this and was responsible for all this stuff, and now you may just be sitting on the couch or doing some consulting or whatever you've decided to pursue in retirement. It's just different, and so you have to kind of work through that difference yourself. But I think when you look at the things that you learned, the skills, the leadership, and all the things that you acquired over the course of that military service, that is exactly what the civil world is looking for. Your ability to operate as a team, your ability to lead, your ability to take initiative, your self-discipline, that is all hugely valued by employers. The challenge is, how do I translate what it was that I did in the military into civilian lexicon where they have an appreciation for what I did? And so I think that's some of the challenges. And the other thing is we might be a little bit insular when we retire and not reach out to the civilian community as much. And so we kind of put up our own fences around who we are, and we've got to be very, very wary of doing that, or leery of doing that.
Right. And so for one of my last questions, what are your hopes for veterans in the future? I know we just touched on some of what they're facing right now, challenges, but what do you hope for them in the future?
That they're comfortable that there is life after uniform. And there's the next great adventure is waiting for them and for their families, and to embrace it with the same vigor that they did every job they took when they're in uniform. Because there's just so much more that they can contribute and so much more they can accomplish, not only wherever they're employed, but in their local communities. And the other thing is to really tell whatever your service is, tell the Army story, tell the Navy story, tell the Air Force, the Marine, the Coast Guard, the Guardians. Tell your story of what it was like, because we really are about 1% of the population that serve in the military. And there is, with each year those numbers get smaller. And there are a few people that realize we're just like everybody else that lives in your neighborhood. We just chose a different profession.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else that maybe we didn't touch on that you'd like to add to this interview?
It's just been an honor to be here today. I really enjoyed meeting the president. It was fun to find out that when she was at the Citadel, she was an honorary brigadier general. So I would have given her a hard time during the lecture at that point. But no, everybody's been gracious, and it was so easy. And there is nothing I enjoy more than having a chance to share a little bit about my views of what's happening in the world, talk a little bit about history, and talk a little bit about leadership. So anytime I get a chance to do this, I relish the opportunity and the event. So while some people get stressed talking in public. For me, this was fun.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much
yeah,
for
you as
joining
well.
us and for your service as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.